We begin this morning, of course, with the latest on Brittney Griner, who is now back home in the United States this morning.
Yeah, Griner arrived in San Antonio, Texas, after she was released from a Russian penal colony in exchange for Russian prisoner Viktor Bout. Griner was sentenced to 9 years in prison after being convicted for having cannabis oil in her luggage at an airport in February. President Biden signed off on the trade. As for Bout, he returned home to Russia last night after more than a decade in U.S. custody. He was serving a 25-year sentence for providing weapons and other materials to terrorist organizations. The announcement of the prisoner swap came as a huge surprise to the entire world. And yesterday, President Biden shared a video of the moment he told Griner's wife that Brittney would be coming home.
Stop it. Great day. Thank you guys. This is such a good day. Oh my God.
And we have full coverage this morning, including a reaction from former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, John Herbst, and the latest reporting from NBC News foreign correspondent Josh Lederman. We will also speak with Paul Whelan's sister, Elizabeth Whelan, to discuss her brother who remains in Russian custody. But we begin with NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra, who joins us now from San Antonio, Texas, where Griner landed just hours ago. Marissa, good morning to you. So we know Griner has had quite the journey traveling back to the U.S. from the United Arab Emirates, where the swap with Viktor Bout took place. Describe the scene for us in Texas this morning. Has she been reunited with family yet? So what's the status on the ground right now?
Right. So that moment that you saw that plane land happened just over 2 hours ago. And then you saw a person who matches Griner's description, someone very tall, getting off of the plane before heading into the hangar. Now, we understand what comes next was heading over here to the Brooke Army Medical Center. Now, the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy tweeted, quote, "So happy to have Brittney back on U.S. soil. Welcome home, BG." And of course, you mentioned that really emotional moment between President Joe Biden and Brittney's wife, Sherelle. And the plan the entire time has been for both of them to reunite once Griner landed here on U.S. soil. So we imagine that that's happening right now behind closed doors. And of course, they have a lot to talk about and catch up on.
Absolutely. Do we have any idea the plans for Brittney Griner at this point? I know it's still a little early, and she just arrived on U.S. soil.
Yeah, so the main plan right now, I think, is just to make sure that she is okay, mind, body, and spirit, right? So Brooke Army Medical Center is a place where they typically bring people who have been in similar situations. I mean, look at 2014. We had U.S. Army soldier Bo Bergdahl was brought here after he was held captive by Taliban allies. And then earlier this year, we had Trevor Reed, who was brought here for a medical evaluation. So this is a pretty standard routine thing. And as far as what happens when they're here, I think that really comes down to the state of the person. So we understand, according to the State Department yesterday in interviews on MSNBC and NBC News Now, they were telling us that that's going to be a conversation with Griner. And this is going to be something that they work together on, how she feels physically and mentally. Remember, this was roughly a 10-month ordeal. So there's probably a lot going on in her mind, and they want to make sure that she's doing okay in all health aspects.
All right, Marissa Parra joining us live from San Antonio, Texas. Please keep us posted.
We're joined now by Paul Whelan's sister, Elizabeth Whelan. Her brother, who's a corporate security executive, remains jailed in Russia and is serving a 16-year sentence after he was accused of spying, something the U.S. has denied. Elizabeth, good morning. Thank you for joining us during what I'm sure is just a tough time filled with mixed emotions for your family. I first want to start by getting your reaction to Brittney Griner's return to the U.S. Your brother, David, had written a statement that really was so gracious and generous about the joy there. But of course, while you're going through what is a tough time for your family, first, just tell me what was going through your mind when you were told of her release.
Well, I'm very pleased to begin with to hear that, she has been released. Any American coming home from wrongful detention like that is really welcome. There are over 60 Americans being held in 19 different countries around the world, and anyone coming home is great. Of course, we want Paul home as well. And, I am pretty angry at Russia for purposefully making this situation so that the administration, had only one deal that they could make and basically refusing to include Paul in that. This is the action of a weak, hostile nation to take Americans and hold them trying to coerce our government into actions.
We know your brother actually spoke with CNN, and he said he's disappointed more has not been done to secure his release. Have you had any contact with Paul since Griner's release from custody? I know yesterday in your brother's statement, David, your brother, had kind of mentioned, I'm worried about when he's going to hear this news, likely from Russian media. How is he doing now? What does he know? What's the latest?
Well, luckily, he did in April hear the news about Trevor from the Russian media. This time, thankfully, a senior official from the administration was able to call Paul in the prison in Russia and let him know what was going on and to reassure him that the fight would continue. But of course he's disappointed. He's been there for 4 years, set up by the Russians on false charges, and he wants to know when he's coming home. And he's not privy to the kind of information that we are here about actions that have been taken during this time. Of course, we're concerned about how he continues to survive this ordeal.
Let's talk now, about those actions. I mean, NBC News has reported, and we heard from the president, that people familiar with negotiations for Paul's release say Russians refused to free him without getting a Russian spy in return. There was not able to be this 2-for-1 deal that they'd hoped. But the U.S. insists it has no Russian spies in custody. There's been some speculation that maybe Germany could help because they do. But are you worried about now what the options are to get your brother out? And are you hearing at all from the Biden administration about potential paths to do so?
The Russians keep changing their mind about what they want for Paul and have done so over the course of the 4 years. And they're just trying to mess with us. And so I'm not worried. I'm annoyed and angry and determined that we're going to figure this out. It's time to get a handle on this particular situation of Russia being able to mess us about like this by using our own citizens. And of course, I'm extremely tired of Paul being the victim of this scenario. They have created this particular fairy tale of Paul being a spy, and now they think they're going to get something for it. And I hope that we can come up with something unexpected for them to help shake loose this negotiation and result in Paul's release.
Elizabeth, your brother David's statement had made note of the fact that it was welcome news that you were able to get a heads up, that your family was aware of this before it was just reported that Brittney was released, unlike when Trevor Reed was released. Now that we still have these questions about how could this be done, what paths are there to get your brother Paul freed, are you in a good amount of communication with the administration, with any officials? Do you feel that you are being updated about potential releases?
Oh, yes. I have weekly calls with people in the State Department, with the National Security Council. Yesterday, I heard from both Secretary Blinken and the president calling just to assure me that the fight was continuing. I don't think anyone likes this outcome at all, or thinks that this is satisfactory, or thinks that the job is complete. And I plan to stick to them like glue and to make sure that as we move forward, that they've got Paul Whelan front and center, and that we're going to try to solve this problem.
Elizabeth, the last question I have for you is, how are your parents doing? Your brother David made mention of their age as we're getting up there, of course, in a holiday season. How are they doing with this news? Well,
you sort of have to accept it, right? I mean, it's not as if we can do anything about it. They're doing very well. They know that Paul's siblings are fighting hard for him. They know that the U.S. government is working hard as well. But of course, they're concerned and worried. And it's difficult to watch other people come home and to watch their son still being there in the prison. They get to talk to him regularly for short 10, 15-minute phone calls. And, to hear him from that prison in Russia, where he is being held, he never committed a crime. And he wants to know, when is he going to come home?
Absolutely. Elizabeth, thank you so much for talking with us through this difficult time. We are thinking of your family. We are thinking, of course, of your brother Paul, a former Marine whose service we are grateful for. We will, of course, continue following this story closely. We appreciate your time very much this morning.
Thank you.
And we want to continue this conversation, so let's bring in Josh Letterman and Ambassador John Herbst now. So, Josh, let's start with you. As we've said, obviously great news for Brittney Griner, but a major disappointment for Paul Whelan and his family, as you just heard. Walk us through why the Biden administration couldn't secure Whelan's release this time around.
Well, from the very get-go, the Biden administration tried to arrange a deal with Russia in which they'd be able to bring home both Brittney Griner and Paul Whelan. But as we have been hearing, the Russians really treated Paul's case very differently because they say that he was a spy. And just to remind people of some of the background on this case, Paul Whelan was arrested in a Moscow hotel room by the FSB in 2018. They say that they caught him red-handed with a flash drive containing classified information. Whelan says he was in Russia for a wedding and was set up by a Russian friend. He says he thought that that flash drive just simply contained photographs, and the U.S. has insisted that he is wrongfully detained, that these are sham allegations against him. But the fact of the matter is, it became clear that the Russians were not going to treat his case, an espionage case, the same way they treated Brittney Griner's case, which was essentially a drug possession case. And that has led to this breakdown where there have been very few options for the U.S. To really move forward in trying to secure his release. Here is how Secretary of State Antony Blinken described that difficult decision.
This was not a choice about which American to bring home. The choice was, in this instance, one or none, because unfortunately, Russia has continued to see Paul's case through the lens of sham espionage charges. In this moment, we were not able to secure Paul's release. But going forward, we remained absolutely determined to do that. And we will continue to engage the Russians on Paul, and we'll continue to look at everything possible to bring him home.
And that is a message that we've heard not just from Blinken, but also from President Biden, from the national security team at the White House, really from all of the top officials in the Biden administration, insisting that they are not done fighting to bring Paul Whelan home. But clearly it is going to be a longer journey home from him, with the Russians taking a very different position on his case.
Absolutely. Ambassador Herbst, let's bring you in here. Obviously, just talking with Elizabeth, Paul's sister, this sort of graciousness that this family's showing as they're dealing with this. David, I think notably in his statement yesterday, said that the Biden administration made the right call by securing Griner's release. Do you agree with that this was the right call, knowing that it couldn't be a 2-for-1 to exchange Brittney for Victor Boot?
Look, it's clear that the Biden administration was in a very difficult situation. And they're in that difficult situation because there was a great clamor for her release. And the Russians understood that, which is why they worked out a deal that was wonderful for them and not so good for us. It's great that Brittney Griner's home. It's dreadful that Whelan is there. It's dreadful that we had to give up a true monster, a great criminal, Victor Boot, to get her out, and we couldn't even get Whelan out. But that's because the Russians correctly assessed that the pressure on the Biden administration to get Brittney Griner's release was very heavy, and they played it for all it's worth. That's unfortunate.
And Josh, I want to go back to you and play a clip from Paul Whelan's exclusive interview on CNN yesterday. Take a listen.
I would say that if a message could go to President Biden that this is a precarious situation that needs to be resolved quickly, and I would hope that he and his administration would do everything they could to get me home, regardless of the price they might have to pay at this point.
Yeah, you just heard it there. He hopes the Biden administration will do everything it can, regardless of price, to get him back home. Do we know what options are on the table right now?
Yeah, that is the big question, right? What is the price that could actually bring Paul Whelan home at this point in time? I don't think anyone in the Biden administration would disagree with what Paul just said there. They get the precariousness of this. They want him home as badly as anyone else. But the fact of the matter is, historically, it is likely that Russia is going to demand something that's more like a tit-for-tat exchange. If they consider him to be a spy, they were going to want to try to do this in some type of a spy exchange. That creates creates a very difficult situation, given that the U.S. has been very adamant in insisting in the first place that they do not consider him a spy. And so at this point, it is not clear what kind of options may be on the table for the U.S. to continue to pursue this going forward, although U.S. officials very insistent this is not the end of their efforts to bring Paul Whelan home.
All right, Ambassador Herbst, thank you. And Josh Letterman, who congratulations and a little bit of news is in order for. He'll be heading across the pond to our London bureau to be a foreign correspondent for us, which is very exciting. Josh, congratulations. Thank you both for your time.
Congrats.
We appreciate your analysis and reporting this morning. And turning now to some breaking news on Capitol Hill, Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema is now leaving the Democratic Party and now will be registered as an independent. Sinema announced her decision in an op-ed published this morning in the Arizona Republic. In it, she writes that she's walking away from the, quote, broken partisan system in Washington. And here's some more NBC News. We've got our newest White House correspondent, Ali Rafa, joining us now with more on this breaking news from Capitol Hill, which she has been covering for us for a year now very faithfully and done a fantastic job. But she will be joining our White House crew. So first, Ali, congratulations on that. But let's get to this announcement. Walk us through Senator Sinema's decision here to become an independent and what we've heard from her so far.
Yeah, Savannah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. This breaking news this morning on Capitol Hill with Senator Kyrsten Sinema announcing in this op-ed and video statement that she is going to become a registered independent. She says in this announcement, a quote from, as you mentioned, from the broken partisan system in Washington. She says when she was elected to the Senate, she agreed to work with both parties to be able to get legislation done, an approach she admits is rare and has, quote, upset partisans in both parties. She adds, quote, like a lot of Arizonans, I have never fit perfectly in either national party. Becoming an independent won't change my work in the Senate. My service to Arizona remains the same. But Savannah, this is going to come as a shock to Democrats this morning who have just secured that Senate majority with even a one-seat cushion with that recent reelection of Senator Warnock in Georgia. My colleague Mike Memoli at the White House has some new reporting this morning about the notice that President Biden was given. He says that he was called and informed of Senator Sinema's decision yesterday afternoon. But per a White House official, Sinema says she will continue to caucus with the Democrats. She will now become the third independent to do so, along with Senator Bernie Sanders and Angus King. Savannah.
Yeah, so you mentioned she will continue to caucus with the Democrats. So tell us, does this mean anything for the balance of power in the Senate going into the new year or for committee assignments?
Well, the big drama on Capitol Hill the past 2 years in this evenly divided Senate has been where do Senators Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin stand on key votes, because Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer knew he needed their support to get anything passed. And that will likely not change because per this White House official, she says she's still going to caucus with the Democrats, but it'll be still tough for Schumer to wrangle these votes together. It also puts a renewed focus on where Manchin stands in all of this. Sinema actually gave an interview to Politico where she says she doesn't expect the Senate structure to change because of her decision. And it is true to an extent because Democrats will still keep their majority. They'll still likely keep their control over committees, but it won't be as much of a cushion that they thought they had with Senator Warnock's reelection. As I mentioned, more of a focus on Manchin. This is also putting a renewed focus on 2024 and whether Sinema will run for reelection. Politico asked her about that in this interview. She declined to give a response, but this is likely going to inspire some Democrats to step into this race and try to win back this seat and flip it back to a Democratic seat, Savannah. All
right, Ali Rafa, thank you so much.
Turning now to history made on Capitol Hill. The House voted yesterday to pass a landmark Respect for Marriage Act by a margin of 258 to 169. And while its passage is delivering a sigh of relief to many in the LGBTQ community, some advocates say the bill doesn't go far enough, especially for those living in vulnerable states. NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns takes a closer look.
To have and to hold from this day forward.
A landmark bill is headed to the president's desk. Congress passing the Respect for Marriage Act with bipartisan support. The bill codifies same-sex and interracial marriage with legal protections for married couples in every state.
This specific piece of legislation is sort of a backup plan if the Supreme Court rolls back marriage equality.
And yet it comes with some criticism from both Republicans.
This is yet another step toward the Democrats' goal of dismantling the traditional family.
And from some members of the LGBTQ community, the very people it's meant to support.
I'm very happy that we're doing it, yet we're doing it in reaction to a Supreme Court justice who has said that they want to roll back our rights.
Especially those living in more conservative states.
As a member of the community in the state of Tennessee, I am deeply worried about the ability for all of our members of our community to thrive.
Phil Cabucci met his partner of 7 years at a Pride event in Nashville, Tennessee, a state that has seen 31 anti-LGBTQ bills introduced this year alone, more than any other state in the U.S.
We still don't feel like we have full equity in this country.
Cabucci says that even though same-sex marriage currently remains the law of the land under the Supreme Court's ruling in Obergefell versus Hodges, he feels like his basic rights are still at risk.
There has been an attempt to dismantle marriage equality in the state of Tennessee every single year in our state legislature. I want to be able to celebrate the incredible movement that we have made, but the reality is that there's still so much more work that needs to be done.
According to the Human Rights Campaign, over half of U.S. states can still deny LGBTQ Americans basic freedoms like the right to rent a home or the ability to receive public goods and services.
We need to change that.
The bipartisan efforts behind the Respect for Marriage Act might be a beacon of hope for future bills.
This is an important step towards us getting a little bit freer and closer to equality, because at the end of the day, this isn't just about a marriage ceremony.
This year, public support for legal same-sex marriage hit a new high of 71% in Gallup tracking polls, up from just 27% in 1996 when Gallup first began polling the issue.
I'm hopeful by this moment, but I'm also very clear that the fight has not ended. A new chapter has just begun.
Dasha Burns, NBC News.
All right, I think it's a good time now to get a check of your morning News Now weather.
It's not a good time. It's a great time. It's a great time.
Always
it's not
a great
good time.
It's a great time because you're here. Bill's here on a Friday. Woohoo!
Yeah, good Friday to you guys. Great to be here. So we're going to talk about a little mini snowstorm, and then we're going to talk about a huge storm coming into the west. And then at the end of this upcoming weekend, we may even have some snow in the northeast. So all of a sudden, we've had a kind of quiet weather pattern, and now things are starting to ramp up. Winter's returning. If you've been one of those people enjoying the warm weather, it looks like that's going to quickly come to an end. So for today, we are waking up this morning and we're probably, got to get outside. You have to clear the driveway a little bit. We have to get the snow off the car, mostly in northern Iowa, southern Minnesota, and snowing pretty good right now in southern Wisconsin. Unfortunately for the kids in Chicago and the teachers too, no snow day for you. It's all rain and a cold rain too. And it looks like in Milwaukee, you may briefly get some snow and go over to rain. So we have winter weather advisories in effect. Again, Madison to La Crosse in the areas around Cedar Rapids. Does not include Milwaukee or Chicago. Additional snow to what's already on the ground. This area from Madison to Rockford is pretty much the worst of it. That's where another 3 to 4, maybe an isolated 5 inches will occur. So that's not bad. That's enough that'll probably get you a snow day in those areas because it's already snowing pretty hard. And then for the west, this huge storm is coming on shore. This storm is going to be one we're going to talk about for at least 7 days. That's how long it's going to take to go from the Pacific Northwest all the way to the East Coast. 90-mile-per-hour winds are possible on the coastline of Oregon, isolated power outages. San Francisco is going to have a very windy Saturday morning, up to 1 to maybe even 2 inches of rain. And even into Saturday night, if you've seen any pictures from the west, the skiing from Mammoth to Tahoe, it's been incredible. And we need it. You've heard about the drought that's going on for like 20 years in the west. So we're building up some snowpack, which is great. Eventually that melts and goes into the reservoirs. And we're going to get 3 to 5 feet from this storm alone. Last week, we had another storm that gave us 3 to 5 feet. So this is gold for areas of the west. Now, of course, if you have travel plans, it's not. But we need the water. And this storm system will also bring some rain to the lower elevations. Not a lot, but enough. And so the rainfall totals locally up to 5 inches, especially lower elevations where you're not getting the snow. And eventually we'll get some down here to the mountains outside of LA. Not as much as to the north in California, but some of it. So let's get to today's forecast and show you what we're going to be dealing with across the country. We are going to be watching temperatures pretty seasonable this time of year in areas of the east. It's been really gloomy lately in areas of the southeast and Tennessee Valley. Temperatures have been hovering, about normal, but kind of cloudy. A lot of people are begging to see some sunshine. tonight. It doesn't look like a lot even into Saturday. And you know, Kathy, Savannah gets really excited when it's finally going to snow. She's addicted to snow angels.
Is she?
And so she's been just
I have the opposite feeling. I'd like to run away from snow.
She's been waiting for the snow. There's a chance you're going to see some snow Monday. I don't know if there's going to be enough for snow angels, but
I think you should broadcast outside when
if you
that's the
condition it,
case.
I hope you can take it. Bill turns into a big complainer because he doesn't like to shovel, and we'll hear about it all season.
It's a lot of work.
I don't want to shovel Monday.
Just a little flurry.
Sounds like you won't have to.
Some flurries might be pretty.
I do love the snow.
Yeah.
He's pulling my leg on the snow angels thing because he likes to just throw me right under a bus. All right, Bill. Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.